Oh man, the last time I talked about Jordan Peterson on this channel, I actually had to push back against him, despite generally being a fan of his older stuff. That was during the whole anonymous speech kerfuffle, where he said that anonymity granted people the right to be cruel online, and that if people are going to comment, they should be demasked. A stance I personally disagree with, as being anonymous is a key component of speaking truth to power. And to Jordan Peterson's credit, he did walk this back at least a little bit, saying that anonymous commenters shouldn't be de-anonymized, but instead put into a lower tier of comments on Twitter and underneath YouTube videos. I guess the idea is, if you want to wade into the anonymous muck, it's not censored per se, it's just on the second page. Peterson does seem to have a habit of sometimes being unnecessarily hyperbolic. It happened again with the event that launched him into prominence in the first place, the claim that misgendering people will be made illegal in Canada. It turned out that wasn't fully accurate. Bill 16 was poorly worded, such that it could mean that misgendering would be illegal, but it was also worded such that a reasonable person would likely conclude that it didn't. What the bill did was add to Canada's hate crime laws gender identity and gender expression. So while speech does not constitute a hate crime in Canada, you're not going to get arrested for misgendering any more than you are for using a slur. What it did change was that crimes that could be hate crimes now also protected gender stuff. So for example, if a racist murdered a black man because he's black, the hatred is an aggravating factor, and the new law simply added gender to that list of protected characteristics. Whether you agree with that or not, the truth is, we're 5 years on and nobody is getting thrown in jail for misgendering a random trans passerby on the street. So I have a feeling that Jordan Peterson might be being a bit more hyperbolic when it comes to the topic of today's video. Breaking! The Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts for, among other crimes, retweeting Pierre Poilievre and criticizing Justin Trudeau and his political allies. That's the new Conservative leader in Canada, by the way, who seems to be on track to unseat Trudeau in the next election. He's quite popular. I am to take a course of such training with reports documenting my progress, or face an in-person tribunal and suspension of my right to operate as a licensed clinical psychologist. About a dozen people from all over the world submitted complaints about my public statements on Twitter and Joe Rogan over a 4-year period, out of the 15 million who follow me on social media, claiming that I had harmed people, not them, with my views. In its wisdom, the Ontario College of Psychologists decided to pursue these complaints even though they could have dismissed them as vexatious. I've been accused of harming people, although none of the complaints involved in the current action were clients of mine, past or present, or were even acquainted with my clients. We are now in a situation in Canada under Justin Trudeau where practicing professionals can have their livelihoods and public reputations threatened in a very serious manner for agreeing with the official opposition and criticizing major government figures. If I comply, the terms of my re-education and my punishment will be announced publicly. I have already had the second most serious category of punishment levied against me and have been deemed at high risk to re-offend. Canadians, your physicians, lawyers, psychologists, and other professionals are now so intimidated by their commissar overlords that they fear to tell you the truth. This means that your care and legal counsel has been rendered dangerously unreliable. To reiterate, I face public disgrace, mandatory political re-education, disciplinary hearing and potential loss of my clinical licensing for agreeing with Pierre Poilievre and criticizing our standing PM, Justin Trudeau. I am willing, if the Ontario College of Psychologists occurs, which they won't, to make absolutely every word of all of this fully public so that everyone can decide for themselves what's actually happening. To clarify, it's been decided. I either submit Jesus. Okay, you don't gotta repeat it this many times, but that certainly sounds like a political witch hunt, doesn't it? This event naturally made headlines in both Canada and elsewhere, with Poilievre even making a video on his campaign channel supporting Justin Peterson's case. Now, on some level this doesn't actually matter that much. Jordan Peterson has moved out of the clinical space ever since blowing up. Getting discredited by the Ontario College of Psychologists means he cannot practice in Ontario anymore. But he's still got his other businesses and his income, his education and experience, and his name. He no longer depends on the college for his livelihood, and he can move forward without them if he likes. In essence, he's reached escape velocity from that system. No punishment they can impose on him will do anything except tarnish his honor. At the same time though, honor seems to be pretty important to him, so I'm not surprised he's not taking this lying down. I wanted to see how much of Jordan Peterson's characterization of these events is actually true, so I've got here the complaint forms sent to the College of Psychologists of Ontario. These are pretty detailed. We don't need to go too deep into them, but I'll point out a few relevant things on each. The first complaint on January 5th, 2022 was from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Jordan Peterson's clients. The complaint says that he encouraged people to commit suicide on Twitter with a Twitter link attached. An email attached to the complaint references the US National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics, while saying, "I'm sure Canada's is similar," which makes it pretty obvious that this person was not actually a client of Peterson's Toronto practice. The tweet in question is Peterson replying to the message, "Based on the record of human behavior, we are already overpopulating this small world." Any arguments I've heard for supporting such a large human population completely overlook the huge loss of species and ecosystems resulting from our self-absorbed attention, by saying you're free to leave at any point. This is apparently encouraging people to commit suicide on Twitter. You know, the leftoids talk about mass depopulation as a good thing all the time, but this is what gets under their skin, eh? It's clearly just a partisan game. The second complaint, on February 18th, 2022, was also from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Peterson's clients. This time it was about the trucker protests. Yes, I know, it's in the render queue. Specifically the news that the Children's Aid Society would be involved in removing any children at the protest after their parents had been arrested. The spirit of Peterson's objection is that because in his view, the protest was legitimate and the government crackdown on it was tyrannical overreach, that the government also moving to intercept the children of protesters constituted the state breaking apart families as political punishment. He didn't say that, but that's what I see reading between the lines. According to the complaint, this opinion undermined faith in Peterson's ability to be a mandatory reporter of child abuse to the proper authorities, which made him ineligible to be a clinical psychologist. The third complaint, on February 4th, 2022, was again from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Peterson's clients. This time it was about Peterson's appearances on the Joe Rogan Experience. This complaint is extremely long and ridiculously nitpicky. They're outlining statements from the first hour of Joe Rogan episode 1769 that are problematic, unethical, or unprofessional, and that there's just as many instances in every other Peterson public appearance. I'm not going to go over all of these, even I'm not as autistic as this guy. You can pause if you want to see them all. But listen to some of this stuff. This person's complaining that Peterson is critiquing Marxism, that he claimed Japanese cars rust more than American ones, and that drunk monkeys are funny. How are these reasonable complaints? The fourth complaint, on February 9th, 2022, was via a phone call, and the transcript appears to indicate that this was from a fellow psychologist. He cites much the same stuff: Twitter posts, appearances on Joe Rogan, how he embarrasses the college and the profession associated with it. More specifically, this person cites a particularly inflammatory public back and forth Peterson had with Gerald Butts, a former secretary to the Prime Minister of Canada, as well as his calling Catherine McKenney, a non-binary they-them candidate for Ottawa mayor in 2022, an appalling self-righteous moralizing thing. Finally, this person took umbrage at Jordan Peterson's claim that Nazis and white supremacists do not exist in Canada. There's no culture of such things in Canada, political or otherwise. That's not exactly true, but unironically, there's probably only a few hundred actual Nazis in the 30 million population nation of Canada. The fifth complaint, on May 17th, 2022, was also from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Peterson's clients. This complaint contained nothing except the statement, "This man has been online bullying and harassing a 24-year-old model. He has been trending since yesterday. This is not the first time. Why is he still registered with you? How is hateful, racist, and a misogynistic bully? How is he allowed to stay registered? Why this special treatment? Jesus Christ, get off Twitter." The sixth complaint, on May 18th, 2022, was also from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Peterson's clients. This complaint revolves around the same incident as the previous one, but with a little bit more meat on the bone. On Twitter, Jordan Peterson used his, quote, doctoral position, he actually is a doctor, his doctoral position to attack a woman in the public sphere. He said she wasn't beautiful. Oh my God, the crime. He said society was being forced to accept fat people as attractive. He used clinical studies to try and prove he was correct and she did not meet the definition or standard of beauty. This is incredibly dangerous and irresponsible behavior. Before on Twitter I taught people how to heat up crack in the microwave. Now I can't even call a fat bitch fat. The seventh complaint, on July 4th, 2022, was, you guessed it, also from a person who falsely claimed to be one of Peterson's clients. This time, it was about the Elliot Page situation. Though the name Elliot Page is never used, the context lines up. The claim is that Peterson's video on the topic brings disrepute on psychologists and causes direct harm to minorities. The funniest bit is where they say, I am a psychologist in Australia and we have clear rules about psychologists being deregistered should they bring disrepute onto the profession or engage in hate speech. Well, why the fuck did you claim to be one of his clients then? The eighth complaint, on July 11th, 2022, was, surprise, surprise, also from a person who falsely claimed to be one of his clients, even though they immediately began their paragraph with, as a member of the general public, also revolved around Elliot Page, specifically leaning on Jordan Peterson's Twitter ban to make the point that he should also be banned from psychology, I guessed. The ninth complaint, July 4th, 2022, same thing, falsely claimed to be a client, outrage over Elliot Page. It's all the same whiny nonsense. Same with the 10th complaint, and that's all the ones I can find, at least from 2022. There are older complaints from years ago that Peterson's talked about, but those have all been resolved. This bundle of 10 complaints are the ones specifically attached to this retraining request. Though the complaints seem to be politically motivated partisan hackery, not worth the paper they're printed on, I have to point out, not one of them mentioned Peterson's support of Pierre Poilievre as a reason. Maybe I missed something, but as far as I can tell, the claim that this retraining from the Ontario College of Psychologists is specifically due to Peterson's retweeting and support of the leader of Canada's Conservative Party seems to only come from Peterson himself. It would indeed be extremely worrying if supporting a politician that a licensing body doesn't like is the reason your license is challenged, but that doesn't seem to be happening here. What is happening is that Peterson's public statements and opinions about several news cycle events, from the fat activist stuff to Elliot Page to the trucker protests, have all offended the Twitterati's enough that they're doing the cancel culture thing with the Ontario College of Psychologists. Even though Pierre Poilievre doesn't seem to actually be involved, this is still pretty worrying, because it's still threatening to de-license people for their political beliefs. The steelman of the other side of this argument is that while a country like Canada has the freedom of expression enshrined in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, meaning that Jordan Peterson has the right to say any of these things without being legally punished by the state, there is still a necessary code of conduct for nearly every licensing body and profession out there. If a profession is governed by a licensing body, and that governance is necessary because that profession requires public trust in order to function, it seems to be reasonable that adhering to a code of conduct be a requirement of holding a license, and failing to adhere to it should be grounds for delicensing. But that means that there are two more factors to consider. 1. Does the licensing body in question uphold that necessary public trust? And is that public trust actually necessary for that profession to function? With psychologists, the answer to both of these questions seems to be yes. For example, if Jordan Peterson was caught multiple times running naked down the street, holding a banner saying, "I am a licensed clinical psychologist," per the Ontario College of Psychologists, not many people would object to him losing the license, so as to not bring the entire psychology endeavor down with him. The obvious reply to that is, well, streaking's illegal. That's why you should lose your job. But I actually don't agree with that. Should you actually lose your job just for breaking a law? What if that same streaker worked for McDonald's and streaked on his off time? Yeah, if you go to jail for streaking, that means you're a no-show at your workplace. But then you're losing your job for not showing up. In my opinion, the act of streaking itself shouldn't be a fireable offense from McDonald's as long as you do it off the clock, even though it's illegal. The difference between these two examples, disregarding the fact that McDonald's workers don't have a licensing body, is that no public trust needs to be upheld for McDonald's workers. So if McDonald's workers break the law outside the workplace, and nonetheless can still fulfill their job, then fine, they shouldn't get fired. But public trust does need to be upheld for psychology, making some sort of standard reasonable. The second factor to consider is whether or not Jordan Peterson's comments actually constitute bringing the profession of psychology into disrepute. This is the tough one, and the answer to it is going to necessarily be a political one. For example, somebody who is very anti-trans will consider the college's pro-trans stance to already bring it into disrepute, and will also consider Jordan Peterson's comments as not nearly as extreme of a course correction as is needed. The issue ultimately is that on the topics that Jordan Peterson is talking about, they are not settled in the minds of the public. It's not like he's saying rape is good or something, where everyone thinks that rape is bad and he's just a lone person who is wholly out of line with society's expectations. There's a lot of good faith disagreement on all three of the T's here: truckers, trannies, and tubs. Reasonable people do disagree with the progressive view on these topics in large enough numbers to be considered an identifiable political bloc, and not just one outlying nut job. The college has publicly released their decision and their reasons behind it. This is a long and very formal document, so I'll just summarize it for you. On August 4th, 2022, 5 months before this story went viral, Jordan Peterson was made aware of the complaints, and the college asked him to engage in what they call an acknowledgement and undertaking, which was a 6-month course involving retraining. Peterson responded on September 6th, claiming he didn't need to engage with the college's request to resolve the complaints because he had already done so on his own by hiring a social media team to make sure he doesn't fly off the handle again online. The college rejected this course correction as being sufficient and requested again that Peterson voluntarily submit to the retraining on September 13th. On September 27th, Peterson's lawyer replied, asking for details about the retraining. On October 7th, the college replied, providing information. The retraining process requires Jordan Peterson to, at his own cost, engage the services of a coaching program approved of by the college within 3 months of receiving their judgment, and complete the program within 12 months. While the information provided by the college outlines the responsibilities of Peterson, the coach, and the college in this matter, it does not actually describe what the coaching process entails, other than reviewing, reflecting on, and ameliorating his professionalism in public statements. On October 21st, Peterson again declined to engage with the retraining process. In response, the college has determined that he is required to engage with it. The documents don't explicitly say he will lose his license if he refuses again, but it's certainly implied, now that the language has moved to required, and the official punishment is an allegation of professional misconduct and a subsequent disciplinary action. Their reasoning is that his public statements are inconsistent with the professional standards, policies, and ethics currently adopted by the college, that his statements pose a moderate risk to the public through undermining public trust in the profession as well as trust in the college's ability to regulate that profession, which is pretty much exactly what I said it would be earlier. The college also noted that Peterson was already given a slap on the wrist in 2020 for previous inflammatory remarks on Twitter, where he was told that as a registered member of the college and in light of your public profile, you may wish to offer your opinions and comments in a respectful tone in order to avoid a negative perception towards the profession of psychology. At the end of the day, while I ultimately side more with Jordan Peterson than the college here, he is not blameless. Nowhere in any of the documents that I've read does it say that Peterson's being punished for his support of conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Not once did Poilievre or the Conservative Party even come up in the documents, and yet that is what Peterson made the centerpiece of his public statement on this event. The truth is, Poilievre is a rising star in Canada right now, riding a wave of popularity, and is likely to unseat Trudeau in the next election. So Peterson hitching his current affairs to that train is good strategy. The only problem is, there's no evidence of it actually being true. Moreover, Peterson does seem to be developing a pattern of being, let's say, unnecessarily quick to act about some things in ways that he was not back in 2015. Between this and the anonymous thing and the Elliot Page thing, which I didn't think was a very good take, frankly, his frequent Twitter spats, hell, the fact that when he initially blew up, he unceremoniously abandoned his private clients, even telling one of them he was too sick to attend their session when he was actually going on TV instead. This is a pattern of behavior. Jordan Peterson once said on a podcast somewhere that social media wasn't good for him. It was making him rash, angry, and depressed. He knows this, because in his initial appeal to the college, he made the claim that he's employing people to help him with his social media presence, meaning that he knows that by his own standard, there's at least some problem with his conduct. Maybe not what he's saying, but how he's choosing to say it. He knows he's not innocent in this. The far greater issue, though, is the college. Even though it does seem to be reasonable that to be a part of a voluntary association, you have to choose to abide by the association's rules. And it also does seem to be reasonable that one of the rules of the association is don't destroy the association's reputation by making an ass of yourself in public. That's all fair. The issue isn't that the college has standards, but rather what standards it's chosen. Look at the rules that the college claim Peterson has violated. 1. Demonstrate appropriate respect for the knowledge, insight, experience, areas of expertise, and cultural perspectives and values of others, including those that are different from their own, limited only by those that seriously contravene the ethical principles of this code. 2. Not engage publicly in public statements, presentations, research reports with primary clients or other contacts, in degrading comments about others, including demeaning jokes based on such characteristics as culture, nationality, ethnicity, color, race, religion, sex, gender, or sexual orientation. 3. Strive to use language that conveys respect for the dignity of persons and peoples as much as possible in all spoken, written, electronic, or printed communications. 4. Abstain from all forms of harassment, including sexual harassment. 5. Avoid or refuse to participate in practices disrespectful of the moral rights of persons or peoples, including their human, legal, and civil rights. 9. Not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of unjust discrimination. Has Jordan Peterson actually violated any of these rules as they are written? 1, it's possible. 2, for sure. 3, maybe. 4, absolutely not. 5, it's impossibly broad. Same with 9. The more important question is, though, are these good rules? Even if Peterson violated one or all of them, are these rules fit for purpose? Are they universally agreed upon by members of the college, other than Peterson? Maybe, I don't know. Are they universally agreed upon by members of the general public, who the college appeals to as protecting them with this action? Absolutely not. Rules 1, 2, and 3 butt up against freedom of expression, and there is a good faith negotiation to be had between those two contrasting principles, though I'm not sure the college is capable of having it. 4 seems to be wholly inappropriate, and I can only assume that it was brought up to tarnish Peterson's reputation. 5 and 9 are so broad that they seem designed to be wielded as political cudgels. Though Jordan Peterson is not innocent here, he shouldn't have lied to make his story blow up, and in a more general sense, he needs to tone down the hyperbole. I've been saying this since he came out of his coma. I do ultimately think the College of Psychologists of Ontario is the larger problem here. This is not the political witch hunt that Jordan Peterson said it was, but it is a different type of political witch hunt, and Peterson made it that much easier for them by being inflammatory online. As it is with literally everything, using Twitter is the problem.